Back into the green market, where Nigeria is yet at its infancy, with estimated total offering of $71 million since the curtain was raised back in 2016 by the Ministry of Environment. But there is room for growth if a number of issues are addressed, especially on the supply side of the market. That was according to the panelists who discussed the green and sustainability bonds market at a workshop jointly organized 2 days ago by the International Finance Corporation and the Nigerian Exchange Limited. Let's listen.
So I was asking, what do you think are the key drivers of sustainable finance in Nigeria and in Africa as a whole? What are the key drivers?
If you're looking at the capital markets, so the main problem, I would say, in the region is the small development of capital markets in Africa. So while, for example, outside of Africa, it is expected that it's nearly 50% with bonds compared to loans for financing of green projects. I would say that in Africa, this percentage is much smaller. And the reason is, of course, because the capital markets in Africa are not as developed as in other emerging markets, and of course not as developed as in the more developed economies. So that's why, as I see, we are supporting the development of capital markets. That's why we are trying to develop capital markets in order to also be a vehicle for financing of green project or climate project in Africa.
Perhaps we'll go to SEC very quickly. There's a statistic that we can throw out there that the largest investable funds are with the pension funds. I think Q2 was about 8 trillion naira. SEC has regulations that cover green bonds and other issuances under sustainable finance. Why do you think that we don't have more people coming to the market and utilizing those rules? What is it that SEC can do?
Thank you. I think from 2018, when we issued the rules on green bond, it is surprising that there are only 3 corporate issuances and no subnational issuance. The opportunities are there to drive those issuances. For instance, if you look at recently, in the month of July, August, September, there was flood all over the country. The state governments keep crying about lack of funds to mitigate such occurrences, but the market is there. The opportunities are there for them to raise funds, sustainable funds, to apply towards dealing with such challenges. But surprisingly, apart from Lagos state government that is taking a shot now on issuance of green bond, no state has made an attempt, because we've not received even a single inquiry about issuance. As a result of the COVID pandemic in 2020, we developed rules for social bonds in 2021. Up till now, we have not seen any issuance either from the corporate or from the subnationals, which are within the remit of the SEC. So my thought here is that the enabling environment is there. Probably it is the issue of lack of knowledge, meaning that we need to do more on maybe enlightening the issuers, enlightening other stakeholders. If you look at the successes of the 3 corporate issuances, the investor appetite is there, but the instruments are not there. So unless the issuers come up with the instruments, the investable funds will just be lying idle. And for the investors, adequate protection has been put in place, because if you look at both the social bond rule, the green bond rules, the key provisions there are how to ring fence the proceeds, so that they will not be diverted or misapplied. There's a provision on where unallocated funds have to be invested so that you don't invest unallocated proceeds of green bond in maybe uses that will be reversing the successes you intend to achieve. Also, the issue of reporting, there is adequate provision for reporting by issuers. So I think everything has to do with enlightenment. We need to step up our enlightenment programs so that the issuers will know that the opportunities are there.
I think the impact of sustainability and sustainability financing, especially in an emerging or frontier market such as ours, is really positive. Given the fact that we have a contributory pension scheme, like you rightly pointed out, and so there's a pool of investable funds for these instruments. The way we look at it is, do corporates really understand it in terms of what they're trying to do? Because there's really no choice, frankly speaking, in the matter. The conversation around sustainability, climate change, it's not business as usual. We can actually see the impact of neglecting the environment. And so it's very important for corporates, which is why we have those sustainability guidelines, for a corporate to take a look at those guidelines that we have at NGS and begin to ask themselves, how can their businesses impact the environment? How can they make a social impact in the community where they operate? And how can they govern their businesses in such a way that there's good succession planning, there's good corporate and high ethical standards in how they deal? These are some of the things that corporates will need to begin to look at in a more critical manner, as opposed to just running off with a business model that they have utilized over the years around demand and supply dynamics, competition. Because in the long run, if nothing is done the way we're going, it's going to be a bad omen for the world. And so I think that consciousness is really what needs to be pushed. From a regulatory point of view, the rules, like the SEC pointed out, the rules are there to encourage corporates to utilize a process that will allow them raise this capital and make meaningful engagement with those capital in a green and sustainable manner to affect the overall impact, this climate change we're talking about, in a positive manner. So to summarize, I think that the positive from a regulatory point of view is the impact is positive, and once corporates work under that consciousness, they will be able to take advantage of the already established framework, and the fear of not being able to raise the required capital is not there. If you look at the PFA investment guidelines, there's over 95 billion naira earmarked for sustainable instruments that are not utilized because the instruments are not there, the corporates are not issuing. So if they understood that, then perhaps the approach will be different. But I think it's not something that they can shy away from. It's a reality that we have to confront. It's a collective responsibility that we have to deal with. And the corporates themselves will really have to think about sustaining their own enterprise by engaging in activities that will enhance the ESG guidelines. Thank you.
You know, the DMO has been very proactive in terms of debt issuances, and we've taken the lead. And let me just draw an analogy for you. For instance, the first issuance was 10 billion, and the second was 15 billion. To an average investor, that is not exercise that's reasonable and that could also make sense to the market. So what does that speak to? It speaks to one issue of projects. We're talking about financing green projects, sustainable projects, social projects. For us, the debt strategy of the DMO and that of the federal government is that we should be able to issue and tie to projects. And the green, social, and sustainable bonds provides a very good platform for us to do that. But we need the projects. So once we have those projects on ground, identified, packaged, and meets the requirement which the ICMA has outlined and which the NGS, SEC, all has put in place, of course, be sure that the DMO will be willing and ready to do that, and we have shown that capacity in terms of the sukuk that we do, that is tied to projects. And we have seen that the volume is rising because the projects are there. So for us, fixed and fixed. Once the MDAs, the implementing agencies are able to come together, and I want to please use this opportunity to speak to all in the room and to the agencies that are listening. I think where we should focus now is how do we get the projects onto the table? And if we have the projects on the table, of course, the next for us is a winning situation, because we'll be able to see this is where we're borrowing, and the agencies have the capacity to do all the reporting, the evaluation, and meet the criteria that is set in the social and green bond framework. Then that we are for us, we're ever ready to hit the ball rolling as far as we have the projects to fund.